She mopped their floor for 15 years, then strode into the conference chamber and dismissed the chief executive officer. They referred to her as Miss Elena, not Elena Ramirez, not Elena from finance, not Mrs. Ramirez as she favored, simply Miss Elena, the custodian. Each dawn at 5:45, well prior to the workplace illuminations, flickering on and the revenue squad commencing to boast regarding who sealed which deal, she was present, propelling a creaky trolley beyond the etched panes of Vanguard Enterprises. Her ash-colored attire had dimmed across the decades, and her trainers had compressed from traversing the expanse of that structure countless occasions. She maintained a cloth stowed in her pouch, a serene expression on her visage, and a cadence in her gait as if she'd been performing this eternally. And in a manner she had 15 years. 15 years of gathering wrinkled tissues from meeting spaces, retrieving candy casings from the lounge ground, and erasing smudges from the lift controls that nobody appeared to sanitize. To the majority of the individuals employed there, she merged into the scenery like decor. If she occupied the area, they conversed around her through her, as though she were unseen, except for several honorable ones, primarily trainees or temporaries who hadn't grasped yet that feigning ignorance of her was component of the employment ethos. But Elena wasn't resentful, at minimum not initially. She maintained her gaze lowered, kept her lips sealed, and heeded. Heed the chuckles from edge suites. Heed the dialogues that folks believed weren't deserving of murmuring. The quips, the conceit, the deceptions. She acquired all she required merely from a swab and a fine set of auditors, once a promotion agent abandoned. A complete hoagie atop the waste bin rather than within it. Elena retrieved it, discarded it sans a term. He strolled past, didn't utter gratitude, merely glanced at her and stated, "Ensure the rug is arid prior to the 3L. Assembly." She grinned and assented. The following day, he dripped Java on that identical rug and accused her of not sanitizing it adequately. She assented once more. It wasn't the initial instance, wouldn't be the final. Below on the 4th level, one of the elder vice presidents, Reginald Thorne, boisterous and perpetually reeking of fragrance, once chortled with his aide, uttering, "Can you envision laboring here your entire existence and not possessing a workstation?" She overheard him. He didn't mind. He didn't recognize her identity. None did. That edifice was brimming with individuals who believed their designation, granted them worth, who thought esteem needed to be gained via periodic targets and 10 a.m. gatherings. That ought to have been messages. They didn't realize that Elena possessed greater of that firm than anybody in that edifice, but she hadn't disclosed to anyone. Not yet. And as she propelled her trolley beyond the managerial suites that dawn, halting to polish a transparent barrier where somebody's imprints marred the firm emblem, her device vibrated softly in her pouch. One dispatch, merely a solitary phrase. "We're prepared whenever you are." She returned the device to her pouch, her demeanor inscrutable. Then she continued strolling. But this occasion she wasn't merely sanitizing surfaces. She was advancing toward something and no one anticipated it. Prior to Elena ever grasped a swab in that edifice, she perched at a culinary counter in Savannah, Georgia, scrutinizing enterprise schemes with her spouse, Victor Ramirez. That was back when Vanguard Enterprises wasn't even a title yet, just a notion jotted on the reverse of a market bill. Victor possessed motivation, that sort of unrefined aspiration you couldn't instruct. He'd matured operating his relatives' transport vehicles, navigating paths through Tennessee and North Carolina. He comprehended distribution thoroughly before it was termed a provision network. Elena, conversely, was the intellects behind the curtains. She didn't converse much publicly, but she possessed a keen method of examining issues, silently dismantling elements and discovering what didn't align. In 1998, Victor and a companion named Marcus Hale amassed sufficient to launch a cargo, mediation with merely one leased workspace, 2 foldable mobiles, and a facsimile apparatus that scarcely functioned. Elena was the initial to contribute. Her patriarch had bequeathed her a modest legacy when he departed, a vitality assurance disbursement. Most people would have utilized for an initial payment on a residence. But Elena had a distinct notion. "Place it in your designation," she informed Victor one evening. "I'll remain in the shadows. No one requires awareness." He gazed at her across the counter and said, "You certain?" "I comprehend what I'm executing," she stated. And I rely on you. Across the subsequent 6 years, the firm detonated. Marcus managed connections. Victor handled procedures. And Elena monitored every cent. She performed the ledgers, submitted documents, assisted compose pacts under a separate corporation she enrolled just in case. It was her method of safeguarding them both. But Victor, he didn't safeguard himself. In 2004, a collision on I-20 claimed him prematurely. A tardy evening shipment journey. A fatigued operator and overturned hauler vanished in moments. Marcus delivered a feeble address at the burial. All commerce scarcely referenced Elena. That was the initial indication. The second arrived weeks afterward when Marcus submitted records eliminating Victor's designation and softly expelled Elena from all internal exchanges. He presumed she'd vanish. But Elena possessed proofs, lawful ones, endorsed papers, from the outset that granted her equivalent, possession of Victor's portion, and greater than that, she possessed influence. She could have litigated, could have marched into that workspace with attorneys, and demanded authority immediately. But instead she delayed because Elena understood the distinction between authority and scheduling. She uttered nothing. No publicity, no correspondences, just quietude. Then in 2007, an employment vacancy appeared on a neighborhood panel in Mon Forevening Custodial Personnel, Vanguard Logistics. She highlighted it. 2 days afterward, she entered with a fabricated curriculum, a Lent domicile, and a new pair of labor footwear. She secured the position immediately. Marcus never identified her, not once, and by that period, he wasn't even the one overseeing the location anymore. A fresh title was circulating. Samuel Harlan, youthful graduate from Georgia Tech, didn't comprehend a thing about how the firm was constructed, but understood how to attire like a chief executive. Elena kept her gaze lowered, kept appearing one evening at a time, one level at a time, 15 years. Every refuse container she vacated, every restroom she scoured. It wasn't merely sanitizing. It was observation. She heeded, observed, delayed, and retained every solitary proof. But ultimately, what you enter comes to the exterior, and Elena was nearly finished excavating. By year 10, Elena understood every square centimeter of Vanguard's central office in Montgomery, Alabama. She knew which corridor had the unstable plank, which oven ignited when you sealed it too forcefully, and which of the supervisors habitually used firm cards for personal suppers. She didn't need to speculate anymore. She understood precisely what was occurring. Vanguard had transitioned from a close-knit distribution firm to a chilly, inflated operation where higher administration sat behind transparent barriers, hurling terminology while frontline laborers were scarcely enduring. She'd observed depot operators arrive with spines throbbing, bearing extra hours forms that never appeared to get sanctioned. She'd overhear the personnel women murmur about trimming edges on wellness perks. And more than once, she witnessed intermediate supervisors being accompanied out, terminated sans warning because they'd breached guidelines. One of them, a gentleman named Malcolm Reed, committed the error of voicing in a personnel gathering about wage inequalities. He was absent within a week. Elena was unseen in those chambers. No one censored what they uttered around her. At first, she merely heeded, but then she commenced recording things. She maintained a tiny ebony journal inside her storage, concealed behind a synthetic sack of reserve mittens. It was packed with designations, dates, citations, who uttered what, when they uttered it, and who occupied the chamber. If you leafed through the sheets, you'd discover inscriptions like, Feb 14, we can slash the incentive reservoir for inferior personnel. They'll accept what we provide them. Harlan to Finance Chief, Chamber 508, June 3rd, Depot security breach disregarded. Gentleman slid. No document submitted. Carla witnessed it. OUG 19 overheard Harlan utter, permit the custodian sanitize it. That's what she's compensated for. I was positioned right there. It wasn't resentment energizing her. It was lucidity. She observed a firm submerging in haughtiness. One evening around 11:45, Elena halted her trolley outside the 6th-level managerial suite. The corridor was shadowy, except for the illumination emanating from the primary conference chamber. She overheard chuckles inside. Harlan's tone resonated. So I informed him if he dislikes his compensation, he can log out and attempt his fortune-operating meal sprint. I've got 20 additional curriculums awaiting. Chuckles ensued. Then one of the vice presidents, Victoria Lang appended, "Half these individuals should be thankful. We even permit them in the edifice." They all chortled again. Elena positioned there unobserved. After an instant, she departed, not with fury, but with affirmation. The more she observed, the more she comprehended. This location wasn't merely fractured. It was decayed. And they weren't going to alter just because someone requested politely. They required to be substituted. She commenced scheming softly, segment by segment. She convened with her lawyer in the rear chamber of a eatery off Interstate 65, a gentleman named Adrian Knox, unobtrusive and straightforward. She delivered him a memory stick. Inside were years of annotations, images, taped dialogues, everything she'd recorded since day one. Adrian didn't utter a term for an extended period after examining it. Then he gazed at her and stated, "You realize once you execute this, it's going to rattle that entire edifice." Elena assented. "It's already rattling. They just don't realize it yet," he grinned. "I'll commence composing documents." The scheme was straightforward. Permit them march directly into their own snare. Permit them continue believing she was merely a sanitizing woman. Permit them undervalue her one additional time. She desired them assured, at ease, because the descent always strikes more forcefully when you never perceive the brink. But occasionally, even the most enduring blaze requires just one ignition. And that ignition was about to occur on an ordinary Tuesday midday. It commenced with a disposable dish. Elena had just completed sanitizing the third-level lounge, polishing the ledges, removing the refuse, replenishing the inexpensive granulated additive they termed superior. She was strolling past the lengthy assembly corridor when she perceived it. A partially consumed portion of celebration, pastry resting dead in the core of the corridor ground, utensil protruding from it, cocoa smeared on the rug. Someone had simply abandoned it there, not even on a counter, just released it. She stooped gradually, not because it was challenging, but because something about that dish felt intentional, like someone performed it just to observe what she'd do. As she retrieved it, she overheard the tone. "You overlooked the mark." It was Harlan, positioned at the terminus of the corridor, palms in his pouches, smirking like a gentleman with nothing to dread. She rotated her head just mildly. "Pardon?" He advanced toward her gradually. "Right there," he stated, indicating the ground adjacent to where she'd just sanitized. "We're about to host a customer display in here. Think you can provide the ground another sweep before they arrive?" There was no mark, not even a scrape. Elena rose, pastry dish in one palm, swab grip in the other. She didn't utter anything. Harlan gazed at her, then chortled like she was component of some internal jest. "I vow sometimes, I think you folks just feign to sanitize so you can remain on the timer." Her eyes constricted just for a moment. "What folks is that?" she inquired. He halted. "Oh, come on," he stated, having. "Don't be so touchy. I'm just uttering if I compensated you a bit more. Perhaps you'd discover the marks before I did." She winked once. No demeanor, then she assented. "I'll ensure it's immaculate," she stated. Harlan applauded his palms once. "That's what I enjoy to hear." He departed, proud of himself. Thought he'd positioned her in her spot. He had no notion. That evening, Elena didn't proceed directly home. She proceeded to the Vanguard Archives chamber, and zone she had silent entry to after hours, thanks to a credential she lent from a supervisor who'd once abandoned it on a basin. She'd retained it for months just in case. She advanced swiftly, extracted dossiers, captured images, messages, fiscal summaries, and most crucially, she reproduced an incentive summary from that identical period. It displayed Harlan had awarded himself a $55,000 achievement, incentive for functional superiority. Meanwhile, he'd slashed worker meal allowances, diminished operator extra hours tariffs, and halted increases for maintenance and depot personnel. The ultimate trigger arrived the next dawn. One of the custodians, Sophia, entered the storage chamber weeping. Her adolescent offspring had been in a vehicle mishap and she'd requested a day off to visit the clinic. Her plea was rejected. Rejected. Insufficient staffing, they stated. Elena perched there, heeding. Sophia couldn't even complete a phrase through the sobs. No one from the managerial office minded. She was just a designation on the timetable. Elena didn't utter anything, but she rose, extracted her device from her satchel, and stepped exterior. She contacted Adrian. "It's time," she stated. You certain? I'm certain. All right, he responded. It's going to be chaotic. I've been tidying up chaos my entire existence, she stated. Let's proceed. Over the next 48 hours, Elena initiated the mechanisms. She provided her lawyer the ultimate proofs, made preparations for a private shareholder assembly, arranged an urgent assessment under her lawful privileges as primary holder. The amusing thing was, none of them observed. Not even when she arrived the next day donning a fresh overcoat, a ironed shirt and footwear that hadn't contacted a swab in months. She strolled past the reception counter, didn't even glimpse at her old trolley. She took the lift to the 8th level, directly to the conference chamber. But what she had to utter wouldn't just alter her existence. It would demolish everything they thought they understood about authority. The conference chamber at Vanguard Enterprises had 12 hide seats, one absurd light fixture, and a $14,000 bespoke counter imported from Portland. Harlan once boasted about it being genuine oak, like that was supposed to signify something to the custodians who removed adhesive from beneath it. At 10 a.m. precisely, the periodic evaluation commenced. Harlan positioned at the forefront of the counter, limbs folded, neckwear slack, like he possessed the air in the chamber. To his left perched Victoria Lang, his deputy. Next to her, Marcus Hale, the sole gentleman in the chamber who should have understood what was approaching, except he didn't. Elena entered 5 minutes afterward, silent as a restrained inhalation. No swab, no mittens, just an indigo jacket and a dossier in her palm. Harlan scowled. I'm apologetic. We're in an assembly. Upkeep is supposed to come through after hours. She didn't wink. I'm not here for upkeep. The chamber altered. Victoria narrowed her eyes at her. I'm apologetic. Do you possess a reservation? I do, Elena stated, strolling gradually to the distant terminus of the counter. And I believe the stakeholders were appropriately informed. That's when Adrian entered behind her, portfolio in palm, composed as ever. Good dawn, he stated. My designation is Adrian Knox, lawful advisor for Mrs. Elena Ramirez, primary stakeholder of Vanguard Enterprises. Quietude. Harlan's mouth parted, but no terms emerged. Elena placed the dossier down on the counter and opened it. Inside were endorsed alliance packs from 1998, refreshed possession documents, and a authenticated correspondence conveying complete voting privileges to her upon Victor Ramirez's demise. Marcus altered in his seat like someone had yanked the carpet from under his feet. No, he whispered. That can't be accurate. Elena turned to him. You recall the packs, Marcus? You assisted compose them. He didn't converse. She advanced forward, her tone composed and subdued. For 15 years, I observed this location become unfamiliar. Observed you inflate your incentives, disregard security breaches, and penalize workers for requesting fundamental courtesy. She gazed directly at Harlan. And I observed you transform my spouse's firm into an arena for your vanity. Harlan attempted to chortle it off. This is okay. This is a misconception. I don't understand what sort of fraud this is. It's not a fraud, Adrian interjected. All documents have been confirmed, and as of this instant, Mrs. Ramirez has summoned for a ballot of no assurance in the current chief executive. She has the power to do so under the original stakeholder pact. Harlan rose, both palms on the counter. You don't understand what you're executing. Elena strolled around the counter gradually, gazing each individual in the eye. 15 years, she stated. You all gazed past me like I wasn't even present. You permitted people to endure. You permitted this firm to decay. I provided you every opportunity to display some compassion. She halted at Harlan's seat. And you faltered. He turned crimson. You think you can just enter here and assume control? She inclined in. I am the firm. Adrian positioned a small pile of correspondences in front of each panel member. Effective instantly, Mr. Samuel Harlan's pact is ended. Protection has been alerted. Harlan's tone fractured. You can't execute this, Marcus whispered under his breath. She already did. Protection arrived seconds afterward. They didn't utter a term, just delayed. Harlan gazed around the chamber for support, discovered none. He seized his device, his dignity, and exited furiously, followed closely by Victoria, who abruptly recalled she had another assembly. Once the chamber emptied, Elena turned back to the panel. I'm not here to act superior, she stated. I'm here to reconstruct what this location used to represent. 1. Of the younger panel members, Liam Voss, scarcely 30, elevated his palm. What precisely do you want to execute first? Elena grinned. Commence by heeding the people who've been disregarded the longest. She sealed the dossier. Alteration commences today, but just because you remove the rubbish doesn't mean the dwelling is sanitary, and Elena understood the genuine labor was only starting. The ensuing Monday dawn, Elena stationed in the managerial area for the first time. She didn't enjoy it. Not because of the zone. It was larger, nearer, sheltered from the precipitation. But something about that area felt detached, like it had been allocated for people who didn't understand what it meant to perspire. Still, she stationed, entered, head elevated. She welcomed the receptionist by designation. Good dawn, Lena. The youthful lady winked. Miss Elena, it's just Elena now. She entered the lift. No swab, no sanitizing trolley, just a journal and a complete schedule. By 9:30 a.m., she was in her suite. Fresh coating on the barriers. Same Pane Vista Harlan used to boast about. But she didn't expend much time gazing out. Too much to accomplish inside. First thing she executed called a personnel assembly. Not for the panel. Not for the managers. For the workers, operators, administratif personnel, custodians, client assistance agents, all welcomed. The chamber filled rapidly. People appeared perplexed, some distrustful. No one understood what to anticipate. Elena entered, positioned at the forefront. No amplifier, just her tone. I want to commence by uttering gratitude, she started. Most of you never understood who I was, and you didn't need to, because your labor spoke more boisterously than any designation in this edifice. She halted. I'm here to alter things, but not by myself. I've expended years heeding to your irritations, your anxieties, your notions. Softly. Now I want to hear them aloud. People commenced altering in their seats. It wasn't what they anticipated. An operator named Javier elevated his palm. Does this mean we regain extra hours? Yes, Elena stated. And backward compensation for the last 2 periods. You'll perceive it on Friday's payment. A lady from personnel, Miriam, rose. And the wellness protection, it's been deteriorating every year. We're already examining new suppliers, Elena stated. And every worker will get a questionnaire to contribute. No more concealed decisions about your welfare. There were no ovation intervals, no exaggerated responses, just quietude. And then whispers. People turning to each other like they were gradually realizing she was earnest. Someone inquired, what about the people Harlan released without reason? We're examining those dismissals, she responded. If you were unjustly removed, you'll be reached. No assurances, but you'll get your designation cleared at the very minimum. Another tone from the rear. You're really the possessor. Elena grinned. Always have been. She concluded the assembly with a solitary vow. If you converse, I will heed. And if you labor, you'll be esteemed. After that, things didn't become simpler. They became tougher. The remaining managers didn't precisely greet her with open limbs. A few attempted to obstruct her choices, contending she didn't possess the commerce foundation. One even queried if she understood how to expand development. Elena gazed at him and stated, I expanded my sorrow into quietude for 15 years. I think I can handle your calculations. That silenced him. She introduced new section leaders, advanced from within, people who had been overlooked for years. She altered supplier pacts, renegotiated depot rentals, and restored the yearly worker. Gratitude Day that had inexplicably dropped from funding years ago. She visited every single section, perched with them, dined midday in the lounge, heated, and gradually the edifice began to feel distinct, not gentler, just more authentic. One evening, Sophia, the custodian who'd wept over her offspring's mishap, left a message in Elena's suite. It said, I didn't think anybody like us could ever reach a location like that. You demonstrated me. Incorrect. Elena retained that message in her uppermost compartment. But even after all the alterations, one query kept emerging in murmurs, and Elena understood she'd have to respond it. Why did she delay so long? It was a query she overheard repeatedly. Why'd you delay, Elena? Some inquired it with interest, others with uncertainty, a few with silent bitterness, like perhaps she'd permitted it to proceed too long. But Elena never became protective. She'd just recline in her seat, interlace her digits, and utter the same thing every time. Because authority only matters when you understand how to employ it. See, Elena didn't delay out of terror. She delayed because the firm needed to display who they were without her impact. She needed to perceive it with her own eyes, needed the decay to ascend to the surface. Because if she had intervened too early, they would have said she exaggerated. They would have manipulated her, twisted it like she was creating commotion about nothing. But 15 years of quietude, that made her irrefutable. She perceived everything. She permitted it to unfold. And when the time arrived, she didn't debate. She just displayed them the reality, and they collapsed under the burden of their own choices. The custodian had become the observer, and ultimately the arbiter. One midday, she strolled back into the same corridor where Harlan once indicated, the mark she overlooked. Same rug, same illumination, except now it was immaculate, and no one dared converse condescendingly to her. A trainee passed her in the corridor, decelerated, and stated anxiously, "Hi, Mrs. Ramirez." She grinned. "Just Elena." That midday, she organized a small assembly for the personnel in the firm patio. No addresses, no streamers, just cuisine vehicles and collapsible seats and people chortling again. Javier, the operator, tapped his beverage container against hers. To the silent ones, he stated. Elena elevated her container to the ones they never perceived approaching. The moral. It wasn't just about her possession. It was about how readily we evaluate people by their outfits. How swift we are to converse over someone grasping a swab. How rapid we are to presume worth is linked to occupation designations in edge suites. Elena wasn't the outlier. She was the prompt. People aren't unseen just because you cease gazing at them. And sometimes the individual, sweeping the ground, is the one who constructed the dwelling. So if you labor with someone you've never really conversed with, perhaps halt and utter greeting. You never understand who's grasping the keys to the entire edifice. If this tale made you halt even for a moment, distribute it. Because somewhere right now, there's another Miss Elena getting disregarded, getting conversed condescendingly to, getting obliterated. And perhaps, just perhaps, she's observing. Let her understand we perceive her now.